My parents and my pregnant twin sister made me live in a tent in the yard when they kicked me out of the house. Now, I have a house, and they are demanding to move in. My sister asked my parents to kick me out of the house when I was 16, saying there was no room for me. I fought for 12 years to get my own place, and now they are trying to let my sister move in with me because she's pregnant with her 4th child. I've suffered from my parents' toxicity since childhood. I have a twin sister who has been a pain in the ass. People say twins have each other's backs. In my case, my twin has always dragged me down whenever she had the chance. As if the bullying in my childhood wasn't enough, she's reappeared in my life. This time, she wants to move into my house with her family, despite being the one who got me kicked out of the house at 16. She's always been narcissistic, largely due to how she was raised. My parents always wanted a daughter, but ended up having a son along with her. They even directly told me they would have ended the pregnancy if it had only been me. Just because there was a girl on the way, they had to bring me into the world, so according to them, I owe my life to my sister. She never misses an opportunity to remind me of her right to everything. You can easily imagine my childhood growing up in a home where I wasn't wanted. Everything revolved around my sister. Despite being the same age, I wasn't allowed to touch her toys. She got new sets of clothes from time to time, while I only got a pair of clothes at Christmas and another on our birthday. If we didn't share a birthday, they wouldn't even bother celebrating it. Or, I just realized that if I didn't share my birthday with my sister, I wouldn't even exist. I received the bare minimum, and these things weren't out of love but to save face in front of critical relatives. The only good thing about my childhood was my grandfather. He was the only one who could see through the lies. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13. That was the worst day of my life. I had no one to back me up. We lived in a small house on the outskirts. My sister and I shared a room. It was more like I had a bed and a small closet under my sister's bed. The whole room was filled with her clothes, toys, and posters. I wasn't even allowed to complain because according to my parents, they were already doing enough for me. My sister didn't like my presence in her room. I was only allowed to enter at night to sleep. Even when I was sick, I had to lie on the couch and not in my room because she was a girl and needed privacy. I desperately longed to turn 18 so I could move out of the house. It seems my family was much more eager to get rid of me. When we were 16, my sister got pregnant by a 19-year-old guy whose parents had kicked him out of the house after he repeated 8th grade 3 times. My parents arranged their marriage, and my father got him a job as a cleaner at his factory. My father, who is a mechanic at an automotive company, brought him home. Obviously, I had to move out of my room to make space for him, but our house only had 2 bedrooms and a tiny space. I asked if I could sleep on the couch, but my father denied it, saying he sleeps on the couch when my mother's snoring becomes unbearable on winter nights. They asked me to find a place for myself, which worsened my situation. My loser brother-in-law used to say, "Buddy, it's not hard to find a place for yourself." My parents kicked me out when I was 15, and I still managed to rebuild my life. Now I have a family. Believe me, things will get better out there. I sighed. Yes, if living like a drug addict means rebuilding life, and getting a minor pregnant means having a family for you, then yes. Most of my relatives lived far away, and besides, my parents threatened me not to show up at any of the relatives' houses because that would mean exposing my parents' toxicity. I asked some friends if I could crash on their couch, but I had no luck. However, one of my classmates lived in a garage. He let me stay for a few months until his parents saw me there and kicked me out too. I slept on a bench on the sidewalk for a few days until the police found me and took me back home. My parents made up the story that I had run away from home. That night, they took me in again. My father got an improvised tent from a junkyard and asked me to use the space in the backyard to set up my place. It was a reward for keeping quiet in front of the police and obeying their order not to show up at the relative's house. The tent was still safer than sleeping outside. Summer was fine, but winter was terrible. One day, it was so cold that I felt like I was almost going to freeze to death. I knocked on the door of my house, but no one answered. I desperately needed help. I knocked on my parents' bedroom window, and my father yelled from inside not to bother him, or else he would come out and knock me down. I felt so miserable that at one point I wanted to die. I cried all night. The next day, I looked for a job that would give me a place to sleep. One of the bakeries needed a worker for their factory, which was about 20 kilometers away, but they agreed to give me a place to sleep and even offered me food. Basically, they baked in their house and needed an extra hand. They offered me to live in their back room, but I would have to clean it. I accepted. The place was quite messy, with flour and sugar everywhere. not to mention the rodents that survived with them. But I was at the lowest point in my life. I gladly accepted that job. I packed my things and left. Even my sister was happy and said, "It's good that you're leaving. We don't have space for you here." They didn't even bother to ask where I was going. I cleaned the place and made it livable. At first, it was hard to get rid of the rodents when they came looking for food, but eventually I got comfortable living there. I had to drop out of high school, just a few months before the final exams of my senior year. My friends told me to keep living in my parents' backyard and finish high school, but I had already given up. I worked hard at my job and lived off my salary. Soon, I realized I needed to improve my skills to get a better job. I learned some skills. My dad is a mechanic, so I grew up playing with his toolbox, working for my parents. They didn't have to buy me toys, plus I helped my dad with the plumbing at home. I saved up and took a course and got a job at a car plant. I worked hard to climb the ranks at the company, and now I'm a supervisor. Recently, one of my old friends was urgently selling his house. He had divorce problems and needed an immediate buyer. I hesitated to buy a 3-bedroom house, but he offered me a great discount on the market price and agreed to accept the down payment in installments. I took the opportunity. 2 weeks ago, I moved into my new house, and today I found unexpected guests at my door. Yes, my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law. It was a surprise to me because I hadn't been in contact with them all these years and they hadn't reached out to me either. This house of mine is almost 25 kilometers from their home, so they wouldn't have arrived here by accident. I'm not in touch with any of my relatives, neither in person nor on social media, but I guess it was the neighbor. I'm still friends with one of my neighbors. Maybe he saw pictures of my house on Facebook and told my parents. I still have no idea how they found the exact address. My dad knew where I worked, so maybe he got the address from there. As soon as I opened the door, they forced their way into my house. Mom and Dad congratulated me and said they were proud of me. I smiled and offered them a chair. I still don't have furniture, just a bed, a few chairs, and a table. My parents sat down and started asking me about buying the house. It was unbelievable to them that I could buy a house at this age while they were still renting. My sister and her lazy husband were casually walking around my house as if they were planning to move in. I asked them, "What's going on? Why did you suddenly appear in my life?" They didn't say anything, just said they were checking on me. Funny, right? They checked on me when I needed them the least. They started giving me updates on their lives. Dad developed hypertension. My sister has 3 kids, 14, 9, and 4 years old, and she's pregnant again. Good for her, I guess. I just sat there nodding, thinking if I should yell at them or kindly ask them to leave. Mom asked me if I was going to get married or if I had a girlfriend. I told her, "None of your business." She replied, "Why are you so grumpy? Is everything okay?" I answered, "Everything was fine until you guys showed up." She laughed and said that if settling into a new house was overwhelming me, she could lend a hand. Just then, my sister walked in and said, "I've decided that we'll take the bedroom with the balcony and attached bathroom. I'm excited to have my own bathroom, and the kids can have the other room." I got angry and said, "What the hell is going on here?" My sister said, "You have a 3-bedroom house and you're single. You don't need that much space. You used to live in a tent, so having 1 bedroom is a big upgrade for you. This house is so big I can fit all of us here." My parents interrupted her and asked her to tend to her youngest child who was crying for attention. I looked at my parents and asked, "What the hell did she just say?" Dad told me it was hard to fit 7 heads in a small house. My sister's eldest, 14, was sleeping on the couch while the middle one slept with my parents and the youngest with my sister. Plus, she's pregnant again, so they need a bigger house. Mom said, "And you know you have a big house now? Can't you host your sister with you?" Before she could finish her sentence, I yelled, "No way, I'm not bringing anyone into my house." My sister yelled at me that I owed her this for bringing me into the world. The same old thing, Mom and Dad would never have had me if it weren't for her, so I owed her a place here. "That house has become so crowded that I can't even breathe." I replied, "Yes, thanks to you, and for bringing me into this world. Now everyone out." Before anyone could say anything, I asked them to leave my house immediately. Dad tried to use his harsh tone, raised his voice, and said it was my duty as the man of the house to take care of my sister. I yelled back that I had no obligation to take care of my sister, but as parents, they had an obligation to take care of me. They hesitated. Now he was fine with his grandson sleeping on the couch, but when I asked, he refused and kicked me out of the house. I ranted about how I survived with rodents in my employer's garage, and how I had been living in a gloomy apartment for a decade, but none of them came to see me. My mom started sobbing and tried to hug me. I blocked her and asked them to leave. My brother-in-law said, "Act like a man, brother. I've lived that life for many years too. I never complained. You have such a big house. You're single. What are you going to do with so much space?" I motioned for them to be quiet. My sister started insulting me for treating her husband like that. I told them, "Then leave if you don't want me to knock him out." I kicked them out of my house without letting them say a word. I'm burning with rage. They've always been toxic and narcissistic, and now they've become greedy. But I'm not 16 anymore to follow their orders like a puppet. If they bother me anymore, I won't hesitate to call the police. Update 1. My sister and her troublesome husband barged into my house. By the way, some of you asked in the comments if my sister offered to pay rent. The answer is a resounding no. She hasn't, and she can't afford the rent. She and her husband are freeloaders and baby machines. They've been multiplying at my parents' house for 12 years, and now they want to do it with me. It's not like my parents are happy to support her. I saw the frustration in their eyes the last time they visited me. However, instead of just kicking her out, they're dumping those lazy people on my shoulders. A week after the first encounter with them, my mom showed up at my house again. This time, she didn't beat around the bush and told me I should let my guard down and let my sister move in with me. I told her no way. She basically repeated the same things, that it was hard to accommodate so many people in a small house, blah blah blah. Even so, my answer was no. Then, she changed tactics and tried to threaten me. I should have caught the hint immediately. She said, "Look, honey, you live alone in this big house, and you're away for 12 hours a day. What if someone breaks into your house? If a family lives here, it would be much safer for you. Plus, you'll have help cleaning the house, doing the dishes, and the laundry." I told her, for the last time, no, and to leave. I don't want any of you in my house. Just a few days later, one of my neighbors told me he saw a pregnant woman with a man and a small child lurking around my property. They were looking through the window, walking around the backyard, and it seemed like they were trying to sneak in. He's an old man who sits on his front porch all afternoon. When they noticed my neighbor watching them, they left. He came to inform me as a goodwill gesture. I thanked him and gave him my number, asking him to call me if he saw them again. My house wasn't secured with cameras. I intended to install them over the weekend. Who would have thought they would break in before that? Just 2 days later, I received a call from this elderly neighbor saying he suspected someone had broken into my house. I rushed home in a panic. He was right. My sister and brother-in-law had entered through the back window. She said, "We had no other options but this. You were being an idiot and wouldn't let us in. Now we live here and you have to deal with it." I was in shock. I mean, to what extent did she go to rub her right in my face? My brother-in-law came out of the room they had made their bedroom. He said, "It was pretty easy, right?" Without thinking twice, I lunged at my brother-in-law. My sister got in the way and I pushed her aside, punching her in the face. Her 14-year-old son attacked me with a bottle and my head started bleeding. The blow wasn't severe and I was on the verge of fainting, but the anger kept me alert. Everyone panicked when they saw the blood. My sister called my parents and told them what had happened. My brother-in-law and his son started cleaning up the mess. My neighbor called the police. My sister and brother-in-law started apologizing and begged me to forgive their son so he wouldn't be arrested. I told them they were all going to jail with him. The police arrived and took my statement. My sister denied all the accusations of breaking in and assaulting me. She said she was visiting my house with her family, her son played a prank on me, and I accidentally slipped and hurt my head. I was furious with them, and that's why I was falsely accusing them. What a liar. Meanwhile, my parents arrived and forced me to drop the charges against them. Everyone joined forces to prove that I was a liar and said I was using the police to get back at my sister. Thank God my neighbor stepped in and gave his statement, and based on that, the police arrested them. They had to spend the night behind bars because my parents didn't have money to bail them out, while their children were left in my parents' care. The next day, they were brought to trial. I went to the hospital and got my wounds treated. The doctor checked them for internal injuries. I had to take a couple of days off to rest. I pressed charges for assault against them and also claimed compensation for what they broke. The court agreed that they should pay for it. Meanwhile, my parents tried every possible way to get me to drop the charges, but I threatened to sue them for planning the attack against me. Their son is a minor, so he was treated according to juvenile law. He spent a week in a juvenile facility, and his parents will have to pay for restitution, lost wages, and medical bills. My sister and brother-in-law were fined heavily, but they begged to serve part of the sentence with community service. A week has passed since then, and there has been silence. I hope they've learned their lesson and stay away from me. Update 2. It seems my parents still won't leave me alone. Yesterday, they showed up at my house again. I slammed the door in their faces. They stood outside for almost an hour, begging me to listen to them. Finally, I had to let them in. I wish I could scream at them from the window and threaten them like Dad did to me 12 years ago. Anyway, I asked them why they were back at my door again. They both started sobbing and said they needed my help. I told them that if it had anything to do with my sister, then they shouldn't count on me. They said it was about them. Dad said, "You see, I'm getting old and I'm feeling fragile. I can't work like I used to. Our house hasn't been repaired in many years. Everything is falling apart." I interrupted and said, "Get to the point." They wanted to move in with me. As a responsible son, I should take them in. I should have done it if they were responsible parents, but they weren't. I asked them what would happen to their house and if they were going to cancel the lease. They said they would give that house to my sister. I said, Great. You found an alternative way to exploit me. You tried to dump my sister on me before and that plan failed. Now you want to burden me one last time. My house is not available to anyone. They said my sister was willing to pay me rent to live in my house, which I could use to pay the mortgage. I said, I don't need her rent. She doesn't need to worry about my mortgage problems. She should take care of herself. Mom started crying, saying it was very difficult for my sister to make ends meet. She can't even sleep well because her children sleep in the same room. I said, it's not my problem if she's being used as a breeding cow. They said, what can we say? You don't agree to anything. You don't want to take in your sister, and you don't agree with us. You should at least let us move in with you. The house is too big for a single man. I said, I don't plan to stay single forever. They tried to manipulate me emotionally, saying I should take care of my elderly parents. I yelled, karma is real. Remember how you kicked me out of the house? This is what life gives you back. I opened the door for them to leave with bitter faces. I don't care what they call me, but I won't be a doormat and give in to their demands. Update 3. I would like to say that my life is normal and peaceful, like anyone else's, but having parents and a sister like mine, it's impossible to give a normal update. So here's what they did this time. After the last time my parents asked me for the house for themselves, they came up with a new idea, even more delusional than the previous ones. They proposed that I build a house in the backyard for them. You see, the house has a relatively large yard, and a small guest house could be built there. So, knowing that I don't want any of them moving into my house, my parents want me to build a small house for the two of them in the back. At least this time they offered to help with the costs, which is considerate. They wanted to contribute around $5,000 to build the house. I don't think they have any idea what it costs to build one. That's not even enough for the materials. I told them that I thought it was an excellent idea. They just had to wait for me to find my invisible checkbook to write them an invisible check, and my dad could go get the materials. My mom said there was no need to be sarcastic since the idea was quite reasonable. How could that be reasonable? Or what kind of people find this reasonable? Well, maybe it's reasonable for the kind of parents who make their child sleep in a tent in their backyard. So, my response was that I might accept them, but only if they agreed to live in the backyard, in a tent like the one I used for a long time. My mom said that was fine for a young man because he could handle those things better, but an older woman like her could no longer stand the cold. And my dad said he wouldn't have a place to sleep elsewhere if my mom snored too loudly at night. I told them that was my final offer, and if they liked it, they could accept it. If not, even though I really enjoy their visits because they are entertaining and funny, I would prefer to live a normal life and have them stop visiting me with increasingly silly ideas. My mom didn't like that too much because she realized I was teasing them, but I was already closing the door in their faces before another ridiculous idea could come out of their mouths. Let's see what other idea they come up with next. Update 4. 7 months have passed, and I haven't heard from my parents or my sister, so I wanted to give an update. Everything has been quiet since then, which seems quite strange to me. I guess they found some solution to their problem. I would be lying if I said I'm not curious about what has happened, but I'm not going to contact them. I won't unleash the Kraken. Their neighbor, who is a friend of mine, has moved away, so he doesn't know anything about them. So, this is my update, saying that I now have a normal life. It feels bad to bring you an update with nothing new, but it feels good to live a life without their drama.